Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. Okay, on the show today, someone I've been in contact with for a while online, but this is my first time actually chatting properly with. Divya Kohli, who is a yoga instructor, mindfulness facilitator from London. So, Divya, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. You do feel like an old friend.
Have you been stalking the videos and the Facebook? And I think we've had quite a lot of Facebook interaction over the years as well.
Yeah,
right?
I think we're both on there a little bit.
Let's start with your journey then. Tell us how you got interested in the body, Divya.
Okay. So actually my background's more head, meaning journalism and news and history and psychology. And so that's kind of things I've been interested in, and literature. So pretty much everything from a young age. And following on from that, actually, if we're talking about work, my early years were in journalism and news and politics. And there's a much longer story behind that. Let's see if I can shorten it right now. So some people might remember a female war correspondent called Kate Adie.
Oh yeah, super famous. She was like the war correspondent.
Yeah, so she was actually an early inspiration for me when I was very young, and I saw her on TV. And I actually said to my parents, I said, why are there no other women reporting from war zones? And I ended up meeting her as a teenager, and I had it in my mind that I would grow up and I would report from war zones. And I was very serious about that. That was an intention. So I said I'd give the short version, didn't I? So I did get into news. I ended up working on papers for a little bit. And actually, now with your question, so a few years into working on a daily newspaper, I was physically getting quite run down. Probably not a surprise if you consider that kind of lifestyle.
Long lifestyle, party hard, work hard. Yeah. Journalism.
Particularly in those days as well. Those kinds of industries were a bit more hardcore than they are now. So there was that side of it, but just the nature of it, the daily being on it and alert, together with quite high expectations upon myself and my delivery and all of this. And I could feel, the classic symptoms early on, trouble sleeping, feeling run down, just physically feeling not great. I didn't have any sort of health or well-being element in my life, and it was we're talking sort of in the 90s here. Things like mental health and well-being, of course, they've been around forever, but it wasn't
it wasn't on the radar in such a big way. Was it? Certain industries, it was just like, look, get up, get on with it. Exactly. It wasn't like, hey, here's your mindfulness class that we provided for your corporate stress. I mean, being off work with stress wasn't really a thing. Times have changed, haven't they?
Exactly, you've nailed it right there, because I've often looked back and, I don't often look back, but when I get asked, I often get asked, journalist to yoga teacher, that's a big jump. What happened? And was it that you discovered yoga and you did this whole thing of follow your passion? And it was like, well, no, it wasn't quite like that. But I wonder if I had something like yoga and mindfulness in my life then, whether I could have found a way of navigating what the challenges were rather than ditching my job, ditching my lifestyle, leaving the country, who knows. But so there you go. That is kind of what occurred. And I didn't see a way out of how to managing the stress. So I ended up leaving the industry, and I had a few years exploring career-wise, maybe what I could do. Always wanted to find something, like so many of us do, that felt meaningful and had a purpose and was making a difference, all of these things. So I had a foray in quite a range of different areas, such as social work, charity work. And the yoga element comes in a little bit before that, in my early 20s, which was a by accident story. I know some people think there are no such things as accidents, but let's just say it was for now. And so that's coming home from work. So this is from the paper I was working on. perhaps with a cigarette in my hand and on the way to a pub. And this is in northwest London where I live in Kilburn. Yeah.
Sounds like a very Kilburn journalistic type story, I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, in those days there were loads of pubs, and now they're delicatessens, but that's a whole other story.
Has Kilburn gone up market? I haven't been there in a few years. It always used to be a sort of dodgy Irish kind of.
No, now it's well, actually, oh gosh, we're on to Kilburn now. We can come back.
Continue the story. We'll come back to London.
We'll come back to that. Yeah. But actually, a pub where I did used to drink. So I was heading there. It's a nice sort of sunny day, a bit like what we've got right now, and there were some people hanging outside this pub with yoga mats on their back. And I don't know if I even knew if it was a yoga mat. And they got chatting to me while I was just, having my cigarette on the street. And they were telling me about this yoga class, which was literally above the pub where I used to.
Right. Was this before yoga was cool? Or was it during that 90s?
Way before yoga was cool. So in my head, I was thinking smelly hippie. And I didn't really kind of have much.
I still think that's accurate. That's totally accurate.
Yeah. And but they were quite persuasive. I don't know why, but about me trying this class.
Yeah.
And they got me there and then to try that class. And one of the ladies there lent me her jogging pants, and it was this little room above a pub. You could hear the pub downstairs, and we went in, and her pants were far too big, so I had to put something to try and tie it round. And the teacher was, shall we say, of an older age. And in black leotard and leggings, blonde.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, my mum's yoga, love it.
Yeah.
I love a bit of that these days. I love a bit of that. Yeah, okay.
So, she looked like a Barbara, but her name wasn't Barbara; it's Gilly, and she was probably in her 70s. And she could do everything, all the moves. But I do remember, and it's that thing of. Ask me what I did yesterday, I won't remember, but there's certain things I can remember. I can remember probably 10, 15 minutes into that class feeling, I wouldn't say good, but feeling open, something a little different, a little bit happy.
Something's going on, right? People have, and yoga does that quite quickly. I think it's one reason yoga is so popular, because you can go quite quickly, I feel a bit better.
Yeah. Exactly. There's something in that. And by the way, I was not an exercise girl before that. I abhorred exercise. I no healthy lifestyle, nothing like that. So I did complete that class, and I ended up going back to that class weekly. And meanwhile, my other life is just carrying on. And this was like a little bit of it wasn't a secret life, but a little tiny compartment of my life that I kept going on. So having said I wasn't very healthy, I was quite nerdy, probably still am a little bit. And so what I did do, so internet had been born, but it wasn't what it was now either. So I got books and VHS tapes, and I just read and learned.
VHS, how are we going to explain a VHS to the kids? That's a really big memory stick that you...
Yeah. Like a brick, and it goes into.
I had VHS of aikido. Okay, cool. So you got into where? What main styles did you practice after that?
Did you say what styles?
Yeah. What were some of the main influences?
So that was hatha, and I sort of kind of learned from books and videos, mainly went to that class. Then so meanwhile, the life, my sort of working life's carrying on, so this is just my own sort of passion happening. So on that trajectory, I did then go into Ashtanga. This is when Ashtanga started becoming popular.
Sure.
Yeah, then I went completely the other way, Iyengar, then Vinyasa. But when I say I did that, I would be trying out those classes, but what I was doing at home was my own thing. So I had a daily home practice from the start. Kept going on, and there's quite disciplined on that. And it was a morning daily practice, and I wouldn't call that anything in particular. And it had the pranayama in it from the start. So probably I had a nice influence in that teacher. But yeah, I was trying these different styles. I get into them, get really passionate, and then I think, that's a bit narrow, and then go the other way, and then think, that's and that's you might like this because I know you travel a lot and you're really interested in cultural difference. And so what I'm about to share is going to sound a bit simplistic, but it's true. So the more I'm getting into yoga, the more my spare time is being swallowed up by yoga and yoga exploration. So I've had some time in India. Before that, I did a 2-year part-time yoga training in the UK. And then I also did a training in America. And my God, so different. So different.
All right. And you're British born and bred, right? I mean, you sound as British as it
goes. Not quite. No, I'm Indian born and British bred.
Okay. So you were born in India, but you moved here pretty young, I'm guessing.
Very young. Yeah.
Very young. Okay.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So that's a whole other bag of conversations and how I feel about culture and God. Anyway, let's stick to the.
Well, you can stay with it, whatever you like. So you're doing yoga in India, America, Britain, and it's pretty different. You're telling me.
Really different, yeah. So just a simplistic but honest take on it. So when I was in India, which was quite a long training and time I was there for, it was very much, and it was Indian teachers, so I'll emphasize that. It wasn't a European center or, it was Indian. I can do that and I can put on the accent and no one can have a go because I'm Indian. So
do it, because I'm not allowed.
Yeah. No, you are. With me, anything goes, I promise you.
And listen, it's not you I'm worried about. It's Johnny Look Offended Pants on the internet. So
I've lost tons of friends these last few weeks, so I'll just say bring it on. Anyway. Yeah.
Divya, so you're learning all these different styles, different cultural differences. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. So in India, it was, here's a book, learn it by tomorrow. And if you don't, you're off the course. So there's an example. In the UK, my training was so thorough and so engaging and so question and answer and, health and safety mad. And my training in America was all about find your voice, be your individual self, all about presentation. And look what and it's still, I think that's still kind of true today. So it's quite interesting when, you can look over that. Okay, so work-wise, quotes, earning a living-wise, not yet a yoga teacher, but eventually, I never actually chose to be a yoga teacher. I still kind of wonder, but so I had left the journalism, I'd left some of the jobs that I'd tried and didn't find fulfilling enough. And it was the choice of moving back home with no money in the bank account, or really trying to quickly find a job. And it was my mother who said, look, you're probably the most trained, qualified teacher in the country at the moment, because I'd had about 4 trainings and 16 years of practice and all this. And she said, why don't you teach yoga? And I was like, no, that's not how it works. You get asked by a senior teacher to maybe offer it as a service. So I'd always come to yoga from that kind of standpoint. Some people call that spiritual, but I just call it what it is. That's how I felt about it. But needs must. So I wrote, so we're talking now, are we talking sort of early 2000s? I sort of wrote to every health club in London, and now yoga's popular and they've got their yoga teachers and, they got their stack. So my CV is going to the bottom of the lever arch file in every, health club. But then I did get a call. And of course, it was from a club the other side of London, and it was winter, and there was no public transport, and it was like, could you cover in a few hours? And I was like, yes, because now it's needs must. It was my first ever class, and I did it. And it was a bit like my first experience of doing yoga within a very short time of teaching. There were 2 people, so 2 people made it. Good for them, actually. It was, snow and all of this. So just the beginning of teaching my first ever class, the feeling was, I feel really engaged in a way I've never felt engaged before. I was really focused, and not just in my head, but with another person. And, I trundled home. It took me hours to get home, and I was, again, very happy. So it's this kind of euphoria little feeling. Mm-hmm. And I was quite I still wasn't sure whether, could I then just now present myself and call myself a teacher, but I ended up following that, and then there's the whole yoga teacher path over the last sort of 16 years, and that's obviously...
So you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah. I mean, a while's relative, isn't it? But yeah.
Let's talk about something interesting. That gives us your story. It gives us your context. It's great.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
But let's take it right up to the modern world. Like, what is a yoga teacher today? Because as you said, all these weird confrontations of exercise and spirituality and Indian culture and British culture and American cultures in the yoga scene today, whether people like it or not, you know, even if they've never been there. Like, what the hell is it?
Yoga teacher.
Being a yoga teacher. Yoga, what is it? Like, what the hell is it in the modern context? No, obviously, there's not one answer to that, but I'd like to hear yours.
It's a huge one. We could chat all for the rest of the week about it, couldn't we? But and you must stop me from doing that. But, so, okay, I would separate yoga from yoga teachers, two separate questions, and I'll probably tackle for me what would be the slightly more manageable one, which is yoga teacher. But I'm happy to come back to the yoga bit because I ask myself that all the time. So ever since I started teaching, I check in with myself and ask, I mean, just naturally, periodically, why do I teach? How does that fit in with what I believe is yoga? But also, I evaluate my teaching myself all the time. So I'm always sort of plugging into that question. And what I found is that, well, as a yoga teacher, it's evolving because I am. So it's that kind of Buddhist pretext, who I am yesterday isn't who I am today. So there's a bit of that going on in that as I'm evolving as a person, my relationship to yoga will also be evolving. So it's not necessarily fixed. But in terms of the dynamics, definitely it's, for me, yoga teacher is about general ethics of teacher, which I'm quite strong on, and I take that as a very serious and heavy responsibility. So guidance, inspiring, educating, imparting, even a bit of safeguarding. I believe.
You know what I would say? It's interesting. Let's just break those down because they're actually different things, aren't they? And I don't think most teachers realize this, that you're teaching, you're guiding, you're facilitating, you're inspiring, you're a role model. Like they're actually sort of related, but not the same. Like I realized this the other day that when I'm teaching several things. I'm teaching the content, but in the manner with which I'm teaching, I'm also teaching, and in who I am in the teaching. And that's way more important than the content, actually. I'm also teaching. So there's at least 3 or 4 levels that I'm teaching at. And some of those may be, hey, you know what? It doesn't really matter what I say, but what matters is I convey enthusiasm. And that person then goes away and practices a lot. It's not that I've particularly given them a new piece of information. They just go, oh, shit, yeah, yoga's great, or whatever the thing is, you know, embodiment in my case. So and I don't think we break those down enough because I think they're worth separating out a little bit.
Yeah. And you've nailed it for me there. It's the name of your podcast book and empire, Embodiment.
Embodiment Sandwich. You may know me from such movies as.
No, you're quite incredible, quite unique. But because if it's not too much of a segue, so the mindfulness bit, so just for your listeners, viewers, I've trained in mindfulness, which always would have felt a bit of a weird thing for me to say, but bear with me on this anyway, because I don't know, meditation, mindfulness to me is just a state, and you know, to say you're training and delivering it. However, it does connect to the yoga teacher part, because my relationship to more formal practice and meditation has been all over the place for years, and I've tried not as many yoga teacher trainings, but I've done some meditation teacher trainings or courses and mindfulness, and I've not got on with any of them. And there's a but coming up, unlike the yoga. So yoga just seemed to, I don't know, be a natural fit for me personally. The meditation has always felt like work, effort, a bit contrived, you know, trying to make something happen. Until 2.5 years ago, I had a chance encounter, again, is it chance? No, whatever, with a lady in a some sort of well-being festival. This lady who you wouldn't spot her in a crowd, just this sort of petite, like brown hair lady, someone, behind a table, someone like you might see at a village fair. This is no disrespect to the lady I'm talking to, because I'm about to big her up. But I had a conversation with her prior to finding out she was a mindfulness tutor, supervisor, trainer. And I left that conversation feeling something I'd never felt before. And I didn't know what it was at the time, but on reflection, it was heard. I felt like I had been heard and listened to more than, this is quite a big claim, isn't it, than I had been by anyone else in my life. No partner, no family member, no friend had ever heard me or engaged with me in the way that I had in this sort of 10, 15-minute chat that I'd had with this lady at some wellbeing event. So I followed up and I messaged her, and that's when I found out what she did for a living. And then I asked if she, and I'd been put off by sort of mindfulness up until this point. I'd done these courses with horrendous teachers. I mean, they're just,
what makes a horrendous mindfulness teacher?
Yeah, well, they're angry inside. They don't, and they don't get
anger. That's common in this world.
Yeah. And then they put on the voice, you know how it goes. And then, but they're not really that voice, and you're just.
Right. It's a veneer. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a bit like CBT. It's like so by rote. It's like ABC, and it doesn't, whereas if you're present, it's spontaneous. But, so that to me, the embodiment of, she was the embodiment of mindfulness. And for me, the teaching flies from there. Now, I don't think, embodying yoga or embodying happiness or embodying whatever you're interested in automatically makes you a good teacher. But I think it's the bedrock.
Solid foundation. Okay, I got it. So what are you most interested in now then? Are you a specialist? Have you got most yoga teachers now have sort of, it's like some particular niche they have, like yoga for the mothers of disabled wombats. They have a particular kind of thing that they do. Do you have that, or are you kind of...
person would get a domain name easily for that, I tell you.
Disabledwombat.com. I'm so getting it. There's someone out there right now getting offended because they have a wombat that has a poorly leg and they're upset. So can we all just take a moment for the wombat with the bad leg?
Okay. Yeah, all
right, poor wombat. All right, so this is quickly got through. So do you have a kind of niche area, or do you more of a generalist? Like, how do you roll?
Yeah, I'm 100% generalist. So it probably works against me all the time, but can't be something that I'm...
Marketing-wise, most people would suggest not to do that. Yeah. But it's not for everyone having a niche, right? It's not for everyone.
No, and I think this is a more general thing, not just yoga thing, that with social media and internet, it works in your favor in anything you do, writer, engineer, what have you, if you're a specialist, because you will get, honed in on.
You get very good at a particular thing, you get known for that particular thing.
Known for that, and then you're everywhere, and everyone knows you for that, because information spreads so quickly and it's so everywhere now. So, whereas, before the information age, actually it probably wouldn't work in your favor, because only a few people would know you for your specialism and you'd be stuck. Whereas before the information age, a generalist, would have more contacts and links.
Especially now with online training, right? So like now there's a hyper niched world where, like, if you're a yoga teacher with a very particular niche, there's still a lot of people on the internet in the world who will be interested. Whereas if you were in a town before, you had to be kind of a generalist because there was only like 3 yoga classes in all of West London or whatever at one point, right? So you had to cater to all kinds of people.
Yeah, there's that. But I also think it relates to, I would call it a problem, but we'll maybe call it a situation of attention spans and just what people are looking for now. So but for me to have a 5-minute platform on anything to sort of give some idea of who I am and what I do, is going to be less seen and engaged with than someone who's just immediately, in the moment what they do and what they offer.
This is clear. You've got a wombat with a broken leg. I'm a yoga teacher for you. Yeah.
And I think we live in a very grabby world now where it's like, I want this, I can have this.
It's for me, especially for me. It's just for me. I don't have to deal with any other kinds of people. Just people like me will be there and I'll get exactly what I want.
Yeah, it's a very needy. Everything's very, I need this. Can you deliver this? And actually going back to the role of yoga teacher, my role as yoga teacher is not to pander to your need. And if I'm not right for you, then I should not try and sort of suggest that I have something or that I am something that I'm not. And
yeah, there is a tension, isn't there, between the sort of Asian model. I see this in Japanese arts, Chinese arts, as well as Indian arts. So I'll say Asian because I've seen it in some of the major cultures. That it's sort of like, look, it's not the teacher's job to change. It's your job to surrender to that art or that teacher or that lineage, and it's your problem if you can't. As opposed to a consumer element, which is that sort of entitled, well, I want exactly what I want now delivered to me in the way I want it. The iPhone, it's not the U phone.
Perfectly said. But then also, and I agree, coming from Indian background, that's although it's changing there as well now. Everything's becoming the American way of doing things, but within, I'll call it Indian for now rather than Asian, because I can't really speak for the other Asian backgrounds. But what I think is good and healthy and evolutionary is to have some bit more bandwidth around that model as well. So, which is why I love your podcast and your conversations, and also the nature of your work, because you're always exploring the two-way relationship. So, it isn't just I'm yoga teacher, you're a student. There is a flow, and at best, isn't it a shame if I'm not being guided or learning or gaining something from my students? If I'm just this sort of solid rock that's got all the answers, that doesn't wash either. And therefore, knowing what the person, the student, the client, the friend needs, I've got to be open to that. And yeah, so that I think that's and that's the other relationship I'm always exploring. I do this not every night, but I teach most days, and particularly in the more sort of the kind of conversations or connections I have with students where I know they're not getting from me what they wish. Some even write to me and say that I've had some really obnoxious emails over my time. Well, you're like this, why aren't you like this? And and this is boring, whatever. And it doesn't matter how old you are.
Imagine telling a traditional Indian yoga teacher they were boring you. Can you imagine that even being a thing that you would do? Like I'm imagining how hard my Japanese aikido teachers would hit me if I said that to them. So, you know what, I'm bored of you and your teaching and your class. It just, that would be like so unimaginable that you would even do that.
Yeah. And I did reply to that person.
Like your entertainment, what I mean? Just another consumer service provider to entertain.
Yeah. Gosh, I think you were there when I wrote my reply. That was, yeah. I heard her again after 10 years. But anyway, her husband's still friends with me. Anyway, so it's like, yeah. So I think, but this is what I consider progress, and, related to, the kind of events going on now. To always reflect back on yourself and to look at the flow, but back to the teacher model and people do come to us for structure, for guidance, for boundaries, for knowledge. So yeah, that does have a position there. And so what I see happening a lot now, speaking of UK sort of yoga scene, possibly the embodiment scene, I'm not sure, and definitely in the mindfulness scene, is almost too invitational.
Right.
And so
I don't have any authority. I'm not saying I know anything more than you. That everything's if you don't mind. On the one hand, it's very empowered because it's not the sort of guru model which is open to abuse, and we've talked about this on the show lots of times. But on the other hand, it's like you've lost the sort of sense of a hierarchy. Like, hey, you're coming to this person because they know something you don't. Let's be honest about that. And maybe I could actually surrender a little bit and take some direction. It's not going to fucking kill me if I don't feel like doing downward dog today, and I can do it anyway.
100%. Yeah, there's a lot of that, and again, I think that's why as teachers or facilitators, I don't think it's enough to maybe read an article about it or have a conversation. I think we need to be asking ourselves this regularly, because that's how you navigate it, and connected to sort of too invitational is we can't let people be stuck with difficulty. You know, there's this big time now in the mindfulness world, you know, the trauma scene. Oh my God, I said it. But, you know, it's
traumatized
like...
and said it. I'm traumatized. Are you traumatized? Everybody's traumatized.
Switch her off.
Oh my God.
But, I mean, how else do you deal with difficulty if you don't go there? And if you're just, you know, kind of... and you have to, again, it's the mixture of the guidance, but also I know all the difficulties I've had in my life. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, I've had to figure it out. I've had to sort of be there. It's not through...
Divya, you're victim blaming. Poor victims like me. You're blaming me for my trauma. You're so insensitive. You're a horrible human being. This is a power move I'm doing right now over you, but I'm going to pretend I'm a victim. Oh my God. How dare you? How dare you?
Yeah, well, you see, if I say I'm coming at it from love and for wider, longer term view, you know, I can make you comfortable now and happy now, and I can be your favorite person and your person that listens. But that's...
You're making people weak. That's the thing. If you don't give people difficulty in an intelligent, consensual way, in a graded scale where there's some choice, and if you do not do that, you're making people weak. And long term, that is less kind. Like what has gone on that people have decided this is the... You know, someone said to me that they got upset that I challenged them on a question they asked in one of my groups. They said, I thought your group was a safe space. And I was like, well, what do you mean by safe space? Do you mean ethical? Yes. Basically respectful? Yes. Do you mean a place where you won't be upset? Fuck no. That's not my job. My job isn't to provide a space where you won't be upset. Life is upsetting. You will be upset in my classes. It's like, it's a training ground. If you can't handle it in a class, what are you going to do when you're fucking at your dad's funeral trying to read a eulogy? Like, it's like we need training in hardship, not just in comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I like what you said there about if you can't do it in the arena of the training ground. So, you know, that should be a ideal sounds the wrong word, but an apt, you know, environment to go there. And of course, every situation is different. You can't be textbook about it. You know that, obviously, you know, as more than anyone else. You know, so it's also about that for me is where the real mindfulness comes alive. Is there's what I've learned. This is either side, you know, student or teacher. You know, there's what I'm bringing to the situation, but in that situation, allowing for spontaneity to me is the most, you know, that's the biggest learning right there. And then what we do in that. But if we're coming with these preconceived, you know, needs, wants, ideas, I'm this, you're this, a bit of that, you know, and it's fluid, it's complex, but that's part of the deal. I think that's when it works.
What do you think's going to happen post-COVID then? So, like, right now, you know, we help like 4,000 yoga teachers work online, loads more did. Everyone started doing their little classes online. Some then backed out of that and said, actually, this isn't really for me. I don't like this. You know, what's going to happen after this? Like, a lot of studios, I guess, have gone bust. Mm. Like, I mean, there's a lot of studios in London. I mean, have they got government backing? Have they not?
Yes, it's a big topic. And I'm quite nosy. It's still journalist background, so I try and, you know, find out what everyone's doing.
Turn sideways.
But also, I am a business person. You know, I run a business. It's and we mentioned yoga teacher, and I guess one of the big differences today, you've probably heard it before, you know, I'm a marketeer, I'm a digital person.
An entrepreneur as well as a yoga teacher.
Yeah, right, and I'm completely self-sufficient. There isn't a partner or just fund or anything like that.
You don't have a rich banker husband funding your yoga business.
No,
come on, this is not how we do it in London, you know? So, it's a common model. It's man. Okay, so what's going on? You're nosy journalist. What's going on?
Okay, so, well, I mean, actually, UK government's not been bad. You know, it has
surprisingly good.
Yeah. So I know, let alone studios. So studios have had you know, things like their business rates covered, even, you know, rental holidays. I'm not saying that's easy, but that has been there. I think what's happening with yoga studios is what's happening, you know, nationally, business-wise, which is if your business was a bit iffy beforehand, then you would have really got it in the neck already. If you were in the red, you know, you wouldn't have survived this. But if you were even a little bit robust, there's no reason why you can't ride this out. Come on, it's 3 months. It's 3 months, you know. So we know it's going on. We know it's given a lot of businesses as a whole. And I'm not being...
The yoga scene could do with being thinned out a bit in places like London, you know.
It can be thinned out everywhere. And that's my personal view. Yeah, there's too much of it. But we are where we are. So, but what I think is going to happen... So, I really don't know. So often I'm quite good at predicting things, actually. But
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. But here's something interesting. Has come to me in the last week or so. So we're online world, and as you mentioned a bit earlier, you can reach out, tap into, connect to a ridiculous bigger audience now, and it's kind of helped yoga teachers see that. Most of us who didn't even think about that beforehand.
Now they realise that they're taking out the middleman with the studios for some, right?
Yeah, and click, here you go, you're online and you're there. And I'm one of those teachers that
running around London,
anything online before March 23rd, and stayed up all night, watched every bloody YouTube video going, and then went online the next day. But where I'm going with this,
it's the 25th of June right now on time of recording, so who knows, by the time this is out in like July or something, there'll be some other apocalypse happening, and it'll seem
do a bit of quiet, couldn't we?
It would be nice. Let's get very British about this, Divya. It would be nice to have a bit of quiet.
Although some anthropologists say that we're experiencing what we're experiencing because things were too good, things needed shaking up, but that's a whole other thing. But something I would like to share with you, Mark, because I know it interests you, and I hear some of the sort of events that you offer, and it's fantastic how you genuinely want to empower people to get out there and not be afraid. But what I have found for me, it's just me, is that my local connection has strengthened like anything.
Yes.
So where were these people when? So I teach in community hall and studios local to me. Where were they pre-COVID? And so I see a yearning for, and I don't just think it's people being scared of public transport. I think it's because the online world has opened so much. There's so much choice. People are bewildered. They want to go with the familiar and what they know.
Right.
I think there's a real feeling of, I see it in people's faces and just their energy, that when they connect to something local, there's something actually a bit of security, reassurance.
Yes.
I think we've been subjected to so much global news and things happening over there and the other. And, Divya, the local yoga teacher, I was just before chatting to you, I came up walking back up the high.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing an increase. We talked about this in some of our podcasts around trauma. There's this increased sense of community and belonging and knowing your neighbors and getting the numbers and this kind of thing. And simultaneously, there's this global sense of us being all connected, and it's like the two things have happened simultaneously, and it's definitely. I don't think anyone can quite put their finger on it yet, but it's definitely changed the relationship between the local and the global and what that means. Yeah. And I think that's going to be quite interesting afterwards when people have choice, like. Let's say travel opens up in a few weeks, which it probably will, right? Are people all going to go crazy and start going to Bali and India for holidays and, doing that sort of stuff again? Or are they going to be a little bit more cautious or a little bit more like keeping it in their local community, buying more locally, like having more local friends? I'm going for a walk with a friend tonight and it's like, okay, we're going to do that a bit more. Or am I still going to be Skyping random people in Russia? It's like, it's hard to tell, but something in that space feels like it's changed.
It does, and I'll be interested, maybe another conversation for us, but I'd be interested to see where your predictions are on that. My hunch is we weren't long enough in a space of transformation for changes to last.
It wasn't bad enough. It wasn't the Blitz. It wasn't the Black Death. It wasn't World War II. It was a few weeks of stress. It wasn't like you had to share food with your neighbors because otherwise you would starve. It wasn't like we had to gang together in gangs to protect ourselves against roaming Mongolians. It's like it was a pretty fucking millennial light version of the apocalypse, wasn't it? We were in our pajamas most of the time, and the worst that happened was there was a lack of toilet roll for a few weeks. I mean, You know, come on, let's not be fucking dramatic about it.
It actually gave rise to lots of jokes and memes that we would be bored without. So, you know.
And would we be memeing were it really bad? Do you know what I mean? Exactly. If it was really like the Black Death, would we be memeing? We'd probably be like, you know, talking to our neighbors out of terror. And, you know, it's like, I feel like, yeah, maybe it wasn't quite severe enough or long enough for people to really change habits. And maybe there'll actually be a swing back the other way. Who knows?
Gradually. But then I think we're also in the hands of bigger systems like we always are. You know, if the economy still runs the way it is, if schools, education, banks, you know, just if the, you know, supply chain, if that's still the same, fundamentally, however much, and would I say struggle? Yeah, a little bit. I struggle with this. There is so much I know I could be and want to be and how I want to live. And yoga helps me with sort of just managing that stress. However, yoga can't ever help me change the system or you know, and I am a bit of a risk taker, but I'm also quite embedded in the very system.
Yeah.
So there's also, you know, and obviously there's the property side of it. And, you know, I think the big change is working from home, and that will have a lot of implications and a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very hard for a boss to get everyone to commute an hour across London through fucking miserable conditions when they were like, hey, I was doing this last month, my figures haven't gone down.
Yeah.
Why, you know, it's going to be very difficult for a boss to get everyone to come into work every day when they've already proven they don't have to, particularly in more middle-class jobs, for people that have houses where they've got spare rooms. And, you know, it's like, that's going to be pretty tricky.
Yeah, I mean, look at the amount they've already saved and will save on real estate. I know the CEO of one of the biggest banks in the world has said, you know, on the sly, there's no way I'm going to look how much we're saving just on, you know, on leases and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, the cost of a large building of bankers in the centre of London, the cost of a major office of any corporation. I mean, we're looking at millions and millions. It's just absolutely insane. Yeah. And on top of that, on top of the rent space, you've got the heating and the cleaners and kind of all the rest of it. So I think it's going to really change the centre of cities, because if you think of the use of a city, the average city is half office space and half kind of everything else. And we've lost a lot of the spaces of, there's going to be less shops, you know, I think, because so many people have got used to buying online. It's
Exactly. And then that will knock on affect the yoga, because certainly, so I'm a Londoner, and, you know, most of the yoga scene here in London has been driven by people going to work, coming back to work, and what, you know, it's the Starbucks and it's the yoga. It isn't.
I love that that's in the same sentence. Starbucks and yoga, like I think they're obviously in the same sentence.
I suppose they're inactives as well, but which I've got nothing against, actually. I think gyms get a bad rep for yoga. I mean, you get perfectly great yoga teachers teaching in gyms. I think, you know, we shouldn't be
sure. I definitely know a few good ones.
Yeah. So I think, the ripple effect of people working from home, that definitely affect the yoga scene and everything else. And but in terms of psychology and, you know, our needs and our short-term needs and desires, I'm not sure that's going to be shaken up too.
We've touched on the political a bit here a few times in different ways. I mean, is there anything you want to say around that topic? You know, I know this is something we've interacted with online a fair bit. There's a sort of assumption that you have a certain politics if you're a yoga teacher. You know, it's there's a lot going on right now in this space. So it's like, anything there that you want to chime in on?
I've just got a bit of a shudder in my belly, actually, because I just wrote a very long letter to my I was going to say my boss. I don't mind calling her that. She owns the yoga studio I teach at.
Okay.
So she, I like the way she approached this. When I say this, you'll know what I mean in a moment, whoever's listening. But rather than, we as a studio believe this, and we're going to do this, and we stand by this.
Yes.
Right, and I'll just make a face and you can guess what I think about that. She said, okay, opening the floor here. Tell me what you think.
Okay, space for dialogue. And was this around the ethnicity issue, the Black Lives Matter kind of thing that's coming up? Is it around?
Which is also really so simple, narrow-minded, clumping this all together. You know, now I'm seeing debates and videos about decolonization of yoga. Suddenly they're getting 1 million hits on YouTube from so it's opened up that, and then it's opened up, you know, yoga as you say, the ethnicity of whether it's teachers or students, and then you've got actually what's going on. Then you've got what's going on in America. Then you've got, you know, and it's like, who decided to put all these things together now? Well, who decided? People who just keep mouthing off and are now suddenly getting, a chance to get their, get their voice heard. But I find it unhelpful at best, and at worst, very disrespectful to the issues involved. To be,
you think there's too many issues clumped together? So this, for example, police violence in America, and I don't know, cultural appropriation of yoga. They're two pretty. Yeah. Those two issues are not the same thing.
And I love that people have views on these things and across the board, and and that there's a particular yoga teacher she was interviewed the other day, and to her credit, she wasn't that angry, but because I don't see how that gets us anywhere. But and she was mentioning that sort of overnight after the incidences in America, let's call it plural, her Instagram feed, and she has no connection to Black Lives Matter. Her Instagram feed just went off the scale because in the past she said she shared a couple of things about her views about lack of representation of Asian culture in the Western yoga. So yeah.
If someone's doing a yoga conference, should there be Indian people there, Indian heritage people there, maybe like yourself who actually grew up in the UK but have that ethnic background? Does that matter, or does that not matter?
I put my come at it, total merit. I don't care what colour, I think total merit. Because we know, a lot of we know about the certain Indian gurus that we know about, right? And were they racist against white people by taking advantages of the Americans coming over in the 60s and 70s and completely, ripping them off?
The modern American notion is you can't be racist against white people. That's
a part two, Mark, and don't get me started on that. But
okay. I've always wondered, well, what's the word you use for discrimination based on ethnicity then? And maybe there's another word for it. Okay, and it is different because of the power differentials and the history, so I would acknowledge it's different.
Yeah.
Okay, so just on merit, so you're saying that you don't want to be given a job because of the colour of your skin?
For me personally, so I have... and again, this is where it's not straightforward. If I could be engaging with another Mark, and I would take into context where you're coming from at this, if you're asking me that, and I would try and be as sensitive and respectful to that. I know a bit about you, so I know that even though this is a public interview, but I'm respecting our dialogue and where you're coming
from. There's a context, right? And there may be a certain amount of trust. You've seen my views. You might go, okay, I'm pretty sure this guy's not a neo-Nazi and he's not like a far left kind of communist. You'd have some sort of idea of where I'd stand, and there's a certain sort of respect and a certain sense of like, okay, there's questions I wouldn't ask guests who I'd just met for the first time, or jokes I wouldn't make. We're always, it seems like lack of context, sometimes almost deliberately and maliciously, is a really big feature right now. Like, we have a context, right? We're Facebook friends, we go back a little bit, we've had certain dialogues. There's certain jokes me and you might make with each other. There's like levels of sarcasm I was just using. I wouldn't do that if it was an American guest who I'd never met before.
Yeah.
Because we have a context, right? A relational context. And we could get that wrong. We could assume over familiarity, or I could make an assumption. I could make jokes about Irishness and Kilburn or something, and I might get that wrong. But it's like, we've got a pretty solid context there. And because of that, we're not walking on eggshells with each other. But what's difficult is doing a podcast or social media, almost anything now, because someone can have a video phone.
Yeah. Someone
else can be in a context who doesn't know us, right? Like, someone might listen to the middle of this podcast, miss the bit where they hear that you're a British Asian woman, and be like, who is this awful white racist? Like, it's just like, because they're just listening to the British accent kind of thing, So it's just, see what I mean? You get it in the next. So sometimes it almost seems like people are deliberately missing context or extracting context in order to take the most malicious frame they can.
Yeah.
And fuck those people.
I think there's that going on. I think, again, it's the attention span. I think it's the cult thing. They're getting, security out of joining something rather than thinking individually.
And I have to think for myself. I can join a group, and then it's prescribed, because if I'm a liberal yoga teacher or I'm a conservative, whatever, my views are given to me, and I no longer have to work that out for myself. and there's a tribe of people who I feel secure in, I get to belong, and they're going to be like, as long as I use the special words, they're going to like me, and then I'm safe.
Yeah, I think use the key word there, belong.
Belonging.
I just think there's a real, I used to think it was peace everyone's after, but I get a feeling it's belonging.
People will sacrifice a lot of truth for belonging, I've noticed. Like there's a trait called disagreeableness that I score very highly in. And what this trait means is basically you're not willing to sacrifice truth for harmony. And most people really fucking are willing to make that sacrifice. And they lie to themselves, and their friends until they lie to themselves so much they believe it to have harmony within their social group. And I don't trust the motives, not of everyone, because I see some really good human beings that have concerns around gender or ethnicity or sexuality. Many of them are my friends. Many of them are people that I professionally associate with the conference, for example. But there's another group of people whose motivations look shifty to me. And then there's this sort of soft group in the middle who just kind of want to belong, and they just kind of don't want too much trouble, if that's okay.
Yeah, then there's the silence brigade as well. And silence, and I'm hearing you, and I agree with that. But the silence thing is the thing worrying me at the moment, is that that's seen as making a statement. And certainly coming from, yoga mindfulness sphere, although I think it's just a human sphere, really, it takes time to process, to reflect.
Right, to think about.
Totally missed, certainly in the yoga world. The number of yoga teachers telling me what to think and read and jumping on things immediately.
Here's your reading list about racism, Divya. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Maybe I want to think about this. Maybe I want to go talk to my friend Divya and get like a point of view from a British Asian woman. And maybe I then want to go talk to my Russian friends and get a totally different point of view.
Yeah, I had, just before we logged on today, I had an email from a friend saying, he's got very different views to me and different heritage and background. Let's leave it at that. And he just wrote a 2-line. He says, can we meet in the park and chat? And I'm like, there you
go. Might learn something from each other, yeah?
And, but I do agree that silence can also be a turning away. And I have had that growing up with, I used to be able to say black, white, brown, purple, and it didn't matter. Now it's loaded, isn't it? But I used to say I used to have
purple. I've missed that one. Purple people.
Yeah, that's another off with her head, but
Is that a Hindu thing? Like Krishna's blue and like something like that, like the purple lines?
I've got a blue god right there, actually.
You've got a blue god going on.
A yellow Lakshmi there. And in fact, I wrote a blog post last year about race and yoga, and I think all of about, 10 people read it.
I thought it was cool.
Now I saw on the...
I don't trust trends. It's not that I don't think it's a super important... Yeah. There are brown people in my family. My family have suffered racism. I have lived in Africa. I know more about this issue than most white people, okay? Right. And it's like... And I don't trust something that, A, is a trend. It's like, hey, let's wait a month and see what you're talking about then. And B, when it's enforced.
Exactly.
I don't want to be told I have to say something, even if I believe it. If you said to me, Mark, say that ice cream tastes nice or we're going to publicly shame you, I'd be like, well, I think ice cream tastes nice, but I'm not sure I want to say that. And any silence from someone, there's good reasons sometimes people are silent. Maybe they're scared, for example. Yeah. This idea that silence means you're complicit, you're with us or against us. That's the most Nazi right-wing thinking out there. That either you say exactly what we say and you bloody well better say it now, or we'll punish you. That is a form of tyranny.
It is, and it's worrying, me at the moment. I've not had this, so I'm 45, I'm not a young blood. I've never had this experience of being in London and noticing people are scared to open them. I mean, this is London. Everyone normally just
it's very East European. You need to spend more time in communist China or Russia or somewhere like that, and you hear where this leads. It's Maoist, is how I would describe it. Actually, it's Maoist,
and it's not even truly representational because, as we know, the louder voices they're not the majority. It's just they're loud and they're always out there, and so you can then skewer what you do think's going on.
Does it piss you off? Excuse me for interrupting. Someone will tell me that's my white patriarchal oppressiveness. Does it piss you off that people speak for you? like on behalf of all people of color. And you're like, well, hang on a minute. Like, I know quite a lot of conservative British Asians, for example, who are from immigrant families, who believe in work ethic, who, you know, British Asians actually have above white people in income, actually. And there's a reason for that. It's cultural, right? So there's a certain work ethic there. Tell me if any of this is out of order. You know, this is based on my friends. So does it piss you off that people speak for you on this topic and others?
100%. And that was in my nice long letter to my studio owner, who is a white woman. So she'd invited us, as I mentioned, teachers and students to, you know, share our views to her. So that was in the letter that I sent to her, that you know, this BA, I don't even know how you say it, BAME, whatever. What the hell is that? You know, why am I suddenly in that group?
It's
I mean, you know, I don't have much in common with a lot of Indian people in London, let alone Black or Asian people living in other parts of the country, you know, and suddenly we're supposed to all be in this one group. So there's the inaccuracy, there's the being patronizing, putting us together, there's the we need help, you know, we need like special dispensation. No, thank you. You know, some people do, but you know, that will be relevant to it could be their education, it could be where they grew up. You know,
you've got a fairly posh voice there, Divya, by the sounds of things. You know, did you go to a girls' school? I think we should bring class into this as a British guy.
Well, wait, I'm happy to talk about my background, but you know, my father came here with nothing. I wrote about that recently. Absolutely nothing. And
my granddad the same.
Yeah, and he suffered violent racism, and I saw it, and I've had that in the playground. Where if I've got privilege is probably thanks to my parents, who did that thing that you mentioned about working hard. I've always been an outsider, still am, but I'm an outsider to white, brown. I mean, you know, it's not because I'm brown, it's not because I'm a woman, it's just because I just have these opinions that don't always conform. But to just to get back to this sort of putting us all together, and I can't be unique in this. I'm sure listening to this, people of all races thinking, yeah, I mean, can you just stop patronizing and thinking that we're all needing the same? So I think needs are different. We talked about context. There's sort of class, education, economics, where you grew up. Then there's the more spiritual side of, you know, what went on before that made, you know, obviously a lot of what I'm sharing must be influenced a bit by my own parents. You know, that comes into it. What you were exposed to growing up, all of this comes into it. It's not stating the party, they're a black and white issue. There's so many other, you know, contributing factors to how someone is and how they're treated.
Nuance has gone out the window, hasn't it? Nuance
comes into it. But if we just...
It's a factor. You experienced racism that I didn't as a result of the color of your skin, right? That's not nothing.
Yeah.
That needs to be considered, right? And as you say, I'm hearing you say a few things. I'm hearing you say you don't want to be patronized, that the nuance is a factor, context is a factor. You can't put everyone in a box. Don't speak for me. And tell me again if I'm wrong here, that I'm hearing you say, like, I don't want to be framed as a victim. That's really what I'm hearing here. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And side by side, give people the spaces and channels and access to share where they need support or need. That's where, you know, from that way, but have that side by side with the understanding that these things aren't just, you know, one thing or another. And that way also, you then don't alienate the societies that you are trying to, I thought we're trying to all get along here. So, you know, using strategies that divide us and sit with. I used this example the other day with a friend who was sort of arguing with me on this. And I said, well, you know, take a couple who are arguing. And if I was to say to my boyfriend, you don't understand me and you never will, well, where are we going to go with that?
And it's because of the color of your skin, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, now I've had lots of discussions, particularly with my last boyfriend, about race. He's white, English, whatever. But it wasn't about, I don't know, proving or needing or one above the other or, you know, needing any particular treatment. It was more just discussion about how it plays in our life, actually, and his too.
Okay. Also, understanding, right? Because I do think this is fair. Like, there are experiences I do not have that you will as a woman, you know, as a woman of colour.
You have experiences I don't have.
And I want to empathise with that, and I want to understand that, and I want to get, there are some cards that I've been dealt which I didn't deserve, maybe, or, you know, I'd rather, though, I think for me, I'd rather frame it like understanding cruelties that happen to other people and injustices that happen to other people and having empathy for that, rather than why I should feel guilty for not having that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So again, if we bring it back to the familiar, because I think in a way people are a bit too throwaway when they talk about these are big topics. You know, you talk about societies, black, white, women. But if we bring it back to the last example you just gave, if I had a child and all I'm doing is saying you're wrong, or you know, you shouldn't think this, well, they might conform to that, but what's then going to happen? What's going on internally? You know, and why should that be any different if you say that to a friend or to someone online? Is that successful? Has that got you anywhere? You know,
does it get you anywhere? I got an email today that was so. I made a joke about Germans in a newsletter we put out from Faulty Towers, and someone got very upset about this, and they emailed me back saying, you know, you're a piece of shit and blah blah blah, and I'm unsubscribing. They did an abusive email, and part of me just went, has that ever worked for you?
Yeah. In
changing a view, in connecting, and maybe the joke was out of order. Actually, no Germans have complained, incidentally. But you know, it was like, okay, has that worked for you as a strategy? Because it doesn't seem smart or kind. And if it's not smart or kind, why do it?
Yeah,
I think people aren't also thinking about the backlash for. Here's another one. So we talked about discrimination in terms of like positive discrimination. So most people out there now would say the opposite of what you said. They should say there should be this thing called representation, right? So if we're doing a conference or an event, for example, we have this German speaking day come up, and we've been very much looking for black German speakers to speak at this event, which is actually a relatively tricky thing to do. And we're making an effort, and we're going beyond our normal networks. And that feels okay to me. And I do want anyone who comes to that event to feel welcome. So this is where I would make a case for, not so much like, this is where I would make a case that there is a case for sort of people going, I belong here, or I'm allowed here, you know, something like that. But here's the thing. Let's say everybody starts doing this as normal. What is that going to create in people's minds? What backlash is that going to create for someone who was looked over for a job? Or for, you know, when you see someone on a speaker schedule and you go, is that person there on merit or not? I hate that question in my mind, because I want to be able to trust totally that everyone there is there on merit, right? Yeah. Does this make sense? I hope I'm not saying something.
And this has been also, you know, I mentioned I was a journalist. I covered these very matters since, you know, the 90s, and it was, and this is where I also, you know, improvements have been made, a lot of improvements. So you know, and I worked for quite far left newspapers, so I've seen how far we've come. And of course there's always, I mean, humans should hopefully always be looking to do things better. So I just want to,
there's always a place we can go to look at racism, to get sexist. There's always another line of improvement, right? But what I hear you acknowledging is things have come a long way.
That's it. But let's keep going with that. I'm not saying that we're done.
In
the example you gave, so obviously that's going to potentially alienate some of the people, and, you know, who feel that they could have been there and they were overlooked. One other element, though, to bring into this, and it applies to pretty much all industries and domains, is why isn't that person of that ethnicity coming forward? So in all the sort of reports, used to work with foundations that they specify in doing research for policy, for policy work. So they will look at, you know, I don't know, causes of radicalism, or why don't we have more black CEOs, or things like this. And, you know, I won't put a percentage on it, but a good amount of it is actually they're not coming forward. And for example, if you look at the arts, and I think the BBC, they're spending 100 million now on saying, you know, to have more diverse representation. Well, speaking as an Indian, I can tell you most Indians don't go into the arts because you don't make much money, and they're not brought up to go into the arts.
There's a cultural factor there in terms of the choice, right?
You go for an audition, and okay, most parts maybe won't be brown skin, but hello, we are in the UK, so that's not out of maliciousness, but also if, you know, and I've seen this because, you know, certainly as a journalist and in the newsroom at that time, I think I was the only brown-skinned person. And it actually didn't bother me in the slightest. I mean, I could delve into that, but it didn't bother me in the slightest. What bothered me more was the relationships I was having with those people in the newsroom. Was I being heard? And you know, the topics I wanted to bring up, were they allowing me to cover? And the answer was yes. So positive, yeah. But again, situations, there. However, there might be different scenarios, say, and I want to be careful, and I think this is what we also need to do, is not speak about things we don't know. So if I'm going to talk about the police, I'm not an expert on...
And you're not a young black British man talking about the police, right? Who might have a very different experience than an Indian British woman.
Yeah, exactly on that. But again, you know, let's allow some, you know, respectful debate. And, you know, it might be that, and as I'm emphasising it might be that, you know, because of so many factors, a lot of people aren't putting themselves forward to go and work for the
well, the difference in outcome doesn't mean there's been racism. So it's not racism that means there's more black players in, you know, playing basketball, right? There are other reasons why that is the case. That's not someone's been racist against the white people, right? So there's different outcomes, which, as you say, like cultural factors. If you go to I don't know, I was at university once and I went into the medical department at my university, and all of a sudden, well over 50% in there were British Asian. I was like, this isn't some sort of discrimination happening here. This is a cultural factor. This is very clear. There's been a certain influence, or, you know, whatever it is. And that is not prejudice. That is just fact. And I think to see any difference in outcome as evidence of discrimination is very poor thinking. It's very sloppy thinking that it could be. And I would be the first to say, let's stamp down on that if there's any evidence that, like, there is good evidence that people discriminate against certain names in job applications, for example. There's some evidence based on that. So it's like, maybe it's good to cover up the names, you know, in the job interview application, because if people discriminate that way, even if it's unconsciously, they might do that. So I go, okay, there's evidence there, but it's not always evidence of discrimination when different groups have a different representation in, you know, who's speaking at the yoga conference or whatever. There may be reasons for that. And I'm not sure I want to try and get to the point where it's always exactly 50% men and women, or, you know, with, you know, 1% other. It's not always. And also, how many groups do we decide upon? So, for example, we're in a British context.
Yeah.
Like, do we talk about class? Do I have to check some sort of measure of the class? So what I now see in Britain is a lot of jobs being given to people of colour who have gone to private schools. And I go, okay, well, that's interesting. So now there is some really posh, you know, British Asians in the Conservative Party, for example. And I go, okay, but are other things being measured that are maybe less obvious? Because they call it segments, don't they? There are infinite segments, if you're sections and intersectionality. There is a near infinite number of those, some of which, like class, are very important, but are far less visible for people to count on a website, you know. And that's what people will do. They'll count the brown faces on a website I put forward, and I'm going, you don't know these individuals and how diverse their opinions are and how diverse their backgrounds are, and who's gay and who's from a working class background. And, you know, it's I'm not going to start putting little pink labels on all the gay people on the speakers list. So I don't know. I'm struggling with this right now, and I've been getting good advice. And I do feel like there's some really good stuff in what's being pushed. And I'm trying to separate out the baby from the bathwater. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to just be like this reactionary guy who's like, oh, fuck those people. It's like, no, there's still important stuff there. But how do we have that nuanced, respectful, empathic conversation?
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. This is, you know, work is always to be done, and there's good work to be done. I don't have, you know, answers to these whole big questions, but from experience, let's go with that. True, helpful, positive change comes slowly, but earnestly. So it's happening. It comes through dialogues. It comes usually in private. So what I mean by that is not sort of the end product or the soundbite. It's the conversations.
The best conversations don't happen on social media. They happen behind closed doors. And having a conversation like this publicly, that takes real courage. Because we're both going to get shit for having this conversation. There's a price to thinking out loud in public now. There is a price, because if I've said one thing that is off a certain line, that's it. Conference over. There'll be people after me and my speakers. So it's like, that is a tricky environment for us to have a conversation in. And I think we've done pretty well, but I know if this was a private conversation in a pub in Kilburn, it would have been better.
Yeah, we can do that at a part too. You're right. And I appreciate you bringing this up. And I don't know how, any of my thoughts will come through. But I'd also, if it's not too much of a kind of trying to link things, I'll bring in the mindfulness here, because coming back to the lady that made the impression on me, the listening and what that means, what that actually means. Now, listening takes time. If there's two-way dialogue's great, but I have to digest. I don't know why I'm in this mode today of bringing up family dynamics. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but if I think back to the times when parents, told me that I've done something not great or I could do better, in that moment I'm reactive. But then it sits, and then this is quite true of children, isn't it? And then you kind of digest it, and when it's going to resonate and click, it will. So giving people that space as well, to process and human stories. We all know that positive relationships come from real connections and
real human connection.
Exactly. And that's just a total game changer. So again, you've got to give the space and the encouragement. Now, say my yoga studio was discriminating, whether they were doing it consciously or unconsciously.
Bias, maybe.
Yeah. Now, if I decide, right, I'm going to set up an Instagram page, I'm going to do all this, I'm going to talk about this and this and this. So I'm now even further removed now from that studio, from that owner. They might feel some shame. They might think, oh, actually, but I tell you what, they'd only really try and maybe force a connection if I was very lucrative to them, or if they'd lost, if I'm not, then actually it's just left a negative residue. And a lot of people say, well, the onus shouldn't be on me if I've been discriminated against to make that move and they've had this conversation.
Yeah, the narrative is like, that's emotional work for you, so it should be on them to do that emotional work.
I want to emphasize, I know this is personal, I'm talking about me, I'm not talking about what anyone else should do. I really want to emphasize that. And I know that grievances and what people have been through, sometimes a whole lifetime of it.
It's different, right? Someone else might have a different experience here, not the same resources you have emotionally or the same education or whatever,
Yes, thank you for saying that. And because we're not having this conversation, are we, to prove points? We're actually we're going there because we're trying to feed something that might be helpful. I mean, that's
to understand something together, and that for me is a different frame. A lot of the framing I'm hearing now is, I have to educate you, or you should learn, and it's not my job to teach you. But that's a very patronizing framing then. Hey, here's someone I basically respect as intelligent, who is very likely, as a British Asian woman, had a different experience than me. Maybe we can have a conversation together and work something out. And I can check out a few of my assumptions, and we can challenge each other, and we can agree and disagree. But there's a sort of the basic frame we're entering into is one of mutual respect and learning, rather than, well, Divya, it's time for me to educate you, or vice versa, which ain't a good frame.
Who likes that? When has that ever worked? But I go a step further, which isn't for everybody. And maybe it's the journalism, I don't know, maybe it's how my dad did it, but I want to know about you, even if I'm the one aggrieved. I want to know about you. I want to know, not because I'm trying to get one on you, but A, I might learn, but B, that's, for me, compassion is, it's got to be the way. And this is where my yoga really, and if I'm not attached to the outcome, I can only do what I can do now. And if I'm not even having this conversation with some idea of some ideal, outcome that will come out of it, that would be entirely presumptuous and arrogant to think people can control the outcomes of such big topics. But we can, lay that open and then see. And so, in that process, how are we going to live? So, it's, to me, this is spirituality, you know, being in a bigger context. We're all players in this world. I was dealt these hands, you were dealt these hands, I was dealt this skin, you were dealt this skin. Now what are we going to do?
You know, I'm thinking there's three contexts that we need to take into account, and people keep missing one or two of them. So like you just named the spiritual context, which I think is really important because that connects us all, right? Yeah. But if we just do that with spiritual bypassing, and there's the social context, which is different being a man and a white man than a brown woman. That is different. We're likely to have had different experiences. But there's also, which is the group sense. If we miss that, we miss something about society. But then there's also the individual, because I wanted to go, hang on, I'm making assumptions about you that you've experienced racism or sexism, whatever. Yeah. But actually I want to check those out because maybe your life was actually fucking privilege and you had great advantages and you lots of money growing up and whatever, you know, and I want to know about that. So it's like, okay, if we miss one of those levels, individual, this sort of collective seems to be the one everyone's focused on right now, or the spiritual, there's the yogis on the spiritual level who are still bypassing all of this and ignoring all the pain. It feels like something major is missed if we don't do all those three levels at once. And I don't get why I don't think that's too hard for intelligent people. And I don't get why it's being, and again, I think in some ways maliciously and deliberately, some of those levels are being pushed out.
Yeah, maliciously, deliberately, maybe it sounds like too hard work. There's a great, I don't know if you've come across them, they're a website, a paper, and a YouTube channel called Unheard. And the guy who runs that, Freddie, he said the other day, you know, even people who are interested in what we're talking about, they just go back to then running their family and they're like, this is too much.
It's a lot to take this on board, isn't it? Most people are just trying to get through the day and it's a lot to take on board to go, okay, now I have to understand systemic racism for, you know, it's like, okay, I'm going to learn about that. It's like how much time and energy when they've dealt with their kids and their business, particularly in COVID times, has the average person got? And I don't mind that, just to be clear, like I've been learning stuff recently. I've been having hard conversations. I've been picking up books. I've been listening to Resma's talks on the internet as a speaker about these issues that I respect. And I put some energy into that. I put some money into that. I paid some people to talk to as well. And I've got limited resources.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's how much of my day am I going to devote to this every day? And I think that it's people go, well, tough shit. But that's that empathy kind of collision, that empathy loss. Like, there's something very arrogant in not having empathy, even for people who maybe it's like, yeah, maybe it is my responsibility to take this stuff on. But it's also I've got a framework, I've got a conference to run, I've got a wife to look after, I've got a life happening, you know. So it's that context.
Yeah, and that's just from a from a real tangible effect, organic, slow, natural, everyday works, but also just from a practical point of view as well. This is why the whole race thing, as much as a lot of the discussions bother me, anger me, piss me off, whatever, I'm also a bit smiling inside right here because I'm like, come on, this has been around since forever.
Right.
And this is a social media explosion, and you know, and then to suddenly have, you know, whether it's people having expectations of me or others, it's a bit like I'm kind of feeling, metaphorically, I'm sitting back thinking, these are things every day of my life, you know, that are just being part of my life. And then to suddenly like shift a gear, which again, I don't think washes well in generally in human nature, just, you know, think this, do this, do this. I don't think it embeds well. So, but I would hope that maybe when things not quieten down, and I don't mean that at all in a way of suggesting that it should as a topic, but when maybe people can find their feet as to whether you're somebody who wants to be an educator, whether it's somebody just in your social circle.
Yeah.
I think public figures like what you do, this is where perhaps there's the greater challenge. It's not new.
I have a certain responsibility in that position, and I think it's fair enough that people challenge me on that. Yeah. And it's not everyone's job to be a kind of expert on these. And with Me Too, we did see a sort of journey, didn't we? It went from a sort of, you know, an initial surge that needed to happen, maybe went a bit over the top at times, got a bit angry at times, and then there's a bit of pushback, and then it settled into a kind of like, okay, cool, consent cultures has established in a new way, and that's a step forward. And sometimes that's just how change happens in these kind of spurts and then these kind of, drop downs. And maybe it can be awkward and uncomfortable at places. And there's a rhythm to that. And I think we can still strive. I had at the time people say, oh, it's just the way it's swinging and you have to deal with it. Fuck you, you're a guy. And I was just like, you know what? That's actually not okay. That's not actually not okay. So I think we can do better than that, particularly, intelligent, thoughtful people. We don't just have to adopt everything that's being force-fed to us. I've enjoyed this conversation a lot, but we are already over time. Divya, is there something you kind of want to end with? I'm thinking of a name for this episode. What's been the theme today? I mean, we talked about culture, consumerism. You probably shocked some of our American listeners with this take on diversity, which is different.
No, stay.
No, we like America. So but this is a different view than people are presented in the media. It's hard to find, and I would say your point of view is not even conservative. It's like centrist. I'd say to find a centrist point of view from a woman of color on these issues and I didn't get you on the show wanting that. It was it's just come up, right? I didn't select you going, let's bring her in to talk about that. I mean, this was booked 2 months ago. It was booked way before this issue kicked off, but it's people might almost be shocked to hear that, or they might be thinking I've engineered this somehow, so it's what do we call this episode?
Passion for difference.
Compassion for difference. Okay, I like it.
I like what you mentioned earlier about the different strands. So the spiritual, what was it? The spiritual, the individual, the collective. That's also how I view life when you asked that earlier question about yoga teacher. So I always reflect on those planes as well. So maybe something that
about different spirit and yoga.
You'll find something.
I'll find something. I'll make something up, or my journalist friends will let me know. Closing message about the body, Divya, after all this politics and theory and all the rest of it. Do we have something closing around the body?
I think regularly tuning in, listening to your inner voice and sitting with that could be not just right now, but ongoing, to just sort of, we talked about how hard work it can be to just deal with matters of our own life, let alone on a collective. So if we were to think, well, how do I even approach this or start or change what I'm doing? I think just allowing for regular time in your life, even a few minutes of where you are just sitting with your own thoughts and feelings and with nothing to sort of change or fix on that could be not just a great starting point, but an ongoing, because I think that can really then feed into how we are in our daily life. And
wonderful. And madam, where do people find you on the internet? Yoga with Divya, right?
Yoga with Divya, yeah. You'll also find my book on there.
We haven't talked about your book. I actually
You don't have to. I love the fact this wasn't a whole PR interview. So well done.
Well, in chapter 2, I clearly give the answer to that. So, I love you and I want your stuff out there. So plug your book, Divya. Tell us about your book. There you go.
Thank you, Mark. So no, honestly, this isn't a plug for it, but it is come out this month. It's called Finding Peace in Difficult Times. And it actually, even though it doesn't talk about news and politics and social affairs, but there's a lot of the heart of what we're talking about there, which is how you do find your inner capacity to discern things, navigate things. And I just wish and hope everyone can trust they've got that, no matter what you've been through in life. So, the book takes a lot of that into account. You might be in financial hardship, you might not have much in your life at all. But I still think, we've got great examples through history, people who have, been up against the hardest things, and that they're the times they have found their inner voice and strength. We can all find that. So anyway.
Yeah, I've got to run, but this has been wonderful. I suspected it would be good. Hopefully it won't cause a huge shitstorm. I always say to listeners, hey, diversity includes diversity of opinion. So hopefully people will be able to take it on board. And thank you so much for joining us today.
You're a star. Thank you.
Take care.
some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/Embodiment Podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodiedfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. Most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodiedfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodiedfacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator Course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.